All right. I'm with Batya Ungar-Sargon again. Welcome back to Walk-Ins Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me again. It's great to be here.
It's so good to see you. You've written another book. Called Second Class: How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. A timely title. How's it going?
Thank God it's going really well. People seem to be responding to the book. My favorite response so far has been people posting photos of it at their work sites, like in a truck or like holding it with like work gloves that are like obviously very well used and loved. And obviously that makes me feel really good. And like, the book had its intended purpose, which was not just to be something that elites toss around between each other, but something that really makes people feel seen and heard.
Yeah. I guess my first question is, when did the elites ever care about the working class?
It's a really good question. It's funny because it used to be that the Democrats really, because all of their success was bound up with labor and the working class, they really did take a very kind of active role in protecting wages. As far back as recently as the 1990s, the Democrats were the hardliners on immigration because, supply and demand. If you
Yep.
bring in more workers, you're going to lower wages. Like it's the most obvious thing in the world. And then when they started catering to the kind of over-credentialed elites and the dependent poor and cutting the working class out of the picture, then there was really two parties who just didn't care at all.
Right. And it seems like from your book that is how you found that, like, the working class feels. They do feel abandoned by everybody.
Oh, yeah. I mean, something that really surprised me was, you know, there's only one thing that working class conservatives hate more than the Democratic Party, and it's the Republican Party. Like they feel really pimped out by conservative elites, even though they agree with them on culture war issues, because they feel that they've been abandoned economically by both sides. And, when I say this, people often ask me, oh, well, then why is there no third party in America? Why is there no success of a third party candidate? There is an incredibly successful third party candidate, and his name is Donald Trump. He is not
Right.
actually a Republican by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, he's much more similar to the Democrats in the 90s than he is either to the Democrats today or to the Republicans of today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think he is like a third party candidate, whether people realize that or not. And how do
Did
you
you
give
watch the rally last night in the Bronx?
No. He was in the Bronx.
He was in the Bronx, and it was so amazing
Did you
because
go?
I didn't go. I couldn't go because I volunteer Thursday nights. I hate to miss it, but I watched it live, the whole thing. He went on for 2 hours, and it was so amazing because it wasn't that the whole crowd was Black and Hispanic. Obviously, a lot of his supporters had come, but there were many, many, many people from the Bronx who were Black and Hispanic at this rally supporting him. And Trump really, he really shines when he is among people who he can feel like who he feels love him. Like it really brings out like the best of his qualities. He basically did an hour and a half long stand up routine that was it was just so funny and so him. And you could so see that he was connecting with this crowd, which is totally predicted in my book, by the way, because the divide in this country is not racial and it's not political. It's along class lines. And so working class people of all races have a lot more in common than they do with the elites, even on the same side politically as them. But it
Mhm.
was really amazing because, something that really came across to me was when you see like AOC or Joe Biden or even Barack Obama speaking to crowds that are made up of people of color, they do that thing that liberals do, like that this Yale study found that liberals do when they talk to people of color, which is they present lower competence. Like they change the way that they speak when they're talking to Blacks or Hispanics. And Donald Trump really does not do that. He was
Mhm.
100% himself. And there was a real just contrast between the speech he gave in the Bronx and the speech that President Biden gave at Morehouse, which is a black male college, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, commencement speech. And, Biden's whole speech to these people was, this country is racist and everything is stacked against you. And you're probably going to fail because this country is so racist. And you have to work 5 times as hard as a white person. And Trump's message was the exact opposite. It was sort of like, I want to talk to you about opportunity. Pick a business that works. Look at what is in front of you and make good decisions. And, it was just so it was so the way that, at least the people in my book who I interviewed want to be talked to, which is tell us about opportunity, talk to us like adults, talk to us like we matter, talk to us like we know what's best for us. And it was just so staggering to see that like just on display. Plus he was very, very funny. I mean, he was making people laugh because he's an extremely funny person.
Yeah. He's an entertainer first.
Yeah.
I mean, people seem to forget that about him often too, that he was an entertainer. I'm like, the guy is objectively hilarious. You can hate him all you want, but he's still going to be hilarious. And that is just something you're going to have to deal with. As he was rising up in 2015, 2016, talking to working class family members of mine who are very much like first of all, how do you define the working class? I think that's really important. And you do a good job of it in your book, because I think we toss around working class and it's like, is it the middle class? Is it people who have trades? Is it people? And I really love how you got kind of granular with your definition.
Thank you so much. It was very difficult because it's a really hard thing to define. Especially in a country like America, which likes to see itself as like a classless society, which we aren't anymore. We have a class divide that is entrenched. And the thing that makes it entrenched is that whether you have a college degree now predicts how much money you make, how long you'll live, how healthy you'll be, whether you will own a home, what movies you watch, what food you eat. And it is being passed on from one generation to the next. And so it has become almost a caste that is inescapable because each of these things will predict all the others. So if you tell me what TV shows you watch, if you say Game of Thrones, I can guess within, certainly like, how much money you make and where you live and what zip code you live in and how much money your kid is going to make and how much money your parents made. I mean, we've become very class-based, which is horrible because it is the thing that this country was founded on to escape. But so the way that I define it in the book is, I wanted to get at where was the dividing line between the people who had those much better lives, much better predictions for their lives, and the people who were really struggling. And the definition that made the most sense to me was people who work in industries that do not require a college degree, who have been locked out of the top 20%, because being in the top 20% and working in the knowledge industry in a kind of job that requires skills you pick up in college, those things are the things that are very correlated with what we would consider to be the American dream. There really isn't a middle class anymore because the people in the top 20% are an elite. They are making 2, 3, 5, 10 times the median income. So they're not really in the middle, although they talk about themselves like they're middle class. They think about themselves as middle class. I use middle class in the book to describe a lifestyle that used to be something many working class people could achieve, which is, own your own home, be able to retire in dignity, have access to affordable healthcare, and your children have at least as many opportunities as you do. And there certainly are working class people who are living that middle class lifestyle, but they are few and far between. And the amount you work does not predict for whether or not you can achieve that. It's kind of a crapshoot. And that sucks. That really sucks because you can be a lazy knowledge industry person and be assured of a middle class, life, the American dream. And you can work 3 jobs and work your ass off as a working class person and be always poor and always struggling. And that is not right. And that is not okay.
Yeah. I mean, that was me. I waited table. I was saying to somebody the other day, the last table I waited was in 2019. It was not long ago. And I dropped out of college because I was paying for it largely. And then I was wanting to be a writer and looking forward in that path. I was like, this is stupid. I can't take on this much debt and then go into an industry that is not certain and not guaranteed to make me money to pay my debt back. So I ended up dropping out, and it was, there were a lot of other reasons too, but it was like it put me into that I think of even though I have one parent who's college educated and it was kind of expected of us, I think of 5 of us, only one of us went to college.
Wow.
And my
But you
brother,
had this experience. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to
go
interrupt you,
on.
but well, because you were tweeting about something recently that I think is so important, which is that when you started writing like about politics and about culture war issues and stuff like that, people would say to you routinely, like, go educate yourself.
Yeah.
Like, they would lecture you because you did not have the like bespoke language that the elites have developed purely for the purposes of keeping people like you without a degree out of their rarefied, specialized little arena so that
Yeah.
they can make sure that they're going to get paid and other people don't infiltrate. But the thing is, like, the knowledge they wanted you to educate yourself about, it's not actually knowledge. It operates like an accent does in the UK. Like the language and the ideology of the wokes that they pick up in their like fancy universities, the whole purpose is to keep people like you out of the industry. And you really picked up on that and lived that firsthand. And it is so appalling that they do that. But like, our education and education now costs 3,000% more than it did in the 60s. These people don't know anything. They don't know jack shit about anything because the whole purpose of the university system right now is to pass on status. It's not actually to teach them anything.
But by the way, being in media now for as long as I have, they're still all status obsessed. I've been at a lot of these media parties. They all talk about what colleges they went to. They all talk about what colleges their kids are going to. They're all wanting to get, like, I still don't feel like I fit in. I don't know that Bill Maher has ever had someone on his show who doesn't have a college degree. He caters to that exact demographic. The working class isn't watching him. Like he knows who his audience is. Even in his clip recently that went viral with Bill Burr, at the end he was like, certain people understand what I'm talking about. Like, we know who he's referring to. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, maybe he has had someone on who doesn't have a college degree, but it's likely been a comedian. I'm not sure. It feels like they're still, even in the media, even kind of penetrating it in the way that I don't feel like I belong at all.
Yeah. Well,
Even when I'm like in those circles of people who still might be kind of anti-woke, they're still
right.
like,
Oh, totally.
it's still
Totally.
like the weird opposite of luxury beliefs.
Totally.
Is paying lip service to luxury beliefs, but like you're still not really doing anything to help any of these people
Totally.
either.
Totally. The status runs deep. It's on both sides. The
Yeah.
obsession. Over 95% of journalists have a college degree. The majority have a graduate degree. So it's not really Bill Maher's fault because he likes to get journalists. It's very hard to find journalists who don't have that degree. Congress,
Yeah,
same
I'm not
numbers,
blaming him.
above 90%. No,
I
I know, but
think
and
it's
you're
like a
so
thing
right about
still.
the anti-woke side because I also feel a little bit like, like the thing that they are obsessed with, it's kind of like the conservative elites who want working class people to throw their one vote away on fighting wokeness, but the elites on the right will do nothing to help them make sure that they can afford groceries. And that is
Yeah.
like a big critique that I have about the anti-woke, movement, intellectual movement, is like it is blind to the ways in which it is an elite movement. It is blind to the class issues. Sometimes people will talk about it and I really appreciate that, but the idea that should be your one contribution, like there's your neighbors like are suffering, your cleaning lady can't afford groceries, like we're living in a dystopian world in which the top 20% who are hoarding all of the wealth, who oversaw the plunder of the middle class, think they're the good guys, whether they're on the left or on the right, because they're fighting this culture war battle that is irrelevant. And I'll just give you a really good recent example of this. this Harrison Butker speech. I hope I'm saying his name right. So he gave this speech, right, in which he said, at a Catholic university, women, I'm sure you're all going to have careers, but your real vocation that I'm sure you're looking forward to the most is having children, staying home and raising them, being a homemaker, being a wife, right? So the left, of course, went completely ballistic and said, this is sexism, blah, blah, blah. He wants women, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. What are we going back to the 1950s? Exactly, Handmaid's Tale. The right, meanwhile, like his t-shirts sold out. They were like, no, of course, this is like the highest aspiration for a woman. Yes, gender roles are real, blah, blah, blah. And they were both completely missing the point. The entire brouhaha was designed to erase the reality, which is that women, even those who want to,
right,
cannot afford to stay home and raise their children because you cannot raise a family on a single income because of policies put in place by both sides. And this is every culture war battle, is left and right pretending like they're fighting about the important thing when really what they're doing is bonifying their status, is consolidating their power and their money and their status, and making sure people don't realize that they are literally picking their pockets.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, literally had this conversation this morning with a family member where she would like nothing more than to stay home, but has to work because they don't make enough money and they have 3 kids. And she's like, if we want to get ahead for our kids, I have to work. Does she want to? Not really. But she does. And so she's like trying to juggle 3 kids, their activities. They both have jobs that are like basically they're of like service to humanity, and in that she's a nurse and he's a fire. It's like the cutest couple ever. But they both have those jobs where it's like overnight shifts, just craziness. And I'm like, how are you guys doing this? And I talk to everyone I know. So I'm like a normie mom in the suburbs now. And it's given me a good glimpse into what people are going through and what they're dealing with. And everyone I know is drowning. Drowning, whether it's financially or drowning just in terms of trying to like juggle it all. The time, the kids, everything feels hectic. Another thing that's happened that I feel like not enough people really talk about, it's like a very small but kind of important thing that happened that affects, I think, the working class a lot, is that I was just having to talk with a family member about this. There are no like sandlot games anymore. People don't just play pickup games in the neighborhood. Everything has become a club that you've got to sign your kids up for, and it's expensive, and it's all club sports, and it's all like, if you want your kids to play with sports and be socialized, you've got to sign them up. It's not just like happening in neighborhoods like it used to. Everything has become very much, and again, it's
scheduled,
like it's scheduled, and kind of like there are institutions and stuff around this, and they're gatekeepers,
right.
and it requires. It's not just like a bunch of kids in the neighborhood are playing a game of baseball together. That just doesn't really happen anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's the result of what happens when you have an elite that is controlling, like we do now. The top 20% controls over 50% of the GDP. So they are really the only consumers that matter, right? Is this elite, this top 20%, 10% with multiple degrees. They now set the standard for everything because they are the only consumers that matter. They are the only people who have money and disposable income. So they are the people who all of our culture, all of our TV, all of our movies, all of our commercials, certainly everything on streaming is designed for them and around their lifestyle, which is heavily scheduled because they are very good at hacking the meritocratic rise. And so they are the people who are putting everything in their books, and the
they
moms
all have nannies and shit. Like they have help. They have like people to help them. My husband and I watch the Hulu commercials. We're like, who are these fucking commercials for? This is insane. Like what kind of crazy people watch Hulu? We were dying laughing about that. And then just you mentioning the commercials, every time I read a New York Times article, which is very rare, I'm like, this is not for me. I cannot afford a single thing that's being advertised to me right now.
That's
like
exactly right.
this
Yep.
Prada bag or whatever. Like, who is reading
Yeah.
this?
No,
I'm
I'll never
clearly not
forget
their audience.
in the summer of I think it was 2020, I got a New York Times magazine, and on the front cover was Angela Davis, the activist, and on the back cover was an ad for a Cartier watch. And the point is, like, these aren't just two sides of the same magazine, they're two sides of the same coin, because all of the woke activism is a smokescreen for the fact that the people lecturing us that they're the good guys and we're the racists are incredibly, incredibly wealthy. And they're wealthy because of an upward transfer of power from the working class, from the middle class into their pockets. And, the connection between the economics and the culture is really important. I think we don't talk about this enough, but, you have to understand, like, when every writer's room in Hollywood now is staffed by only people who went to Harvard, right? What happens is that the restaurant that the average American worker can afford to take their family to on a nice occasion becomes the punchline of
Right.
every TV show on their streaming services. Do you know what that does to the morale of a people? Like, what that does to the social fabric when the whole um, ideology and citizenship, what it means to be a citizen, is catering up to an elite, and everyone else is locked out of that. It is so disgusting. And I talk a lot about the disgustingness of the upward transfer of the wealth, but there's been also a downward pressure in terms of just the spiritual pressures on the working class, the psychological pressures of saying to these people, you are nothing. I'm going to ship your job to China, and then I'm going to bring in a Venezuelan illegal migrant to take the job that you managed to cobble together here. It's so crazy, Bridget. Meat packing jobs, those used to be like the job to have. Those were
Yeah.
great jobs. They had great hours and great wages and great benefits. And now they are entirely staffed by desperate slaves to the cartels who work totally unsafe, terrible
Often
wages, no
children.
benefits, children.
Yeah.
It's like, it's horrible what we're doing to them. But imagine what that says to working class people here about who they are in the eyes of the people who set the agenda for this country.
Yeah, it definitely feels too like post pandemic, the rich got so much crazily richer. Like, my uber rich friends are so uberly rich beyond anything I mean, there's so much money out there. So some of the stuff I wonder too, and no one's really been able to answer this question for me. And the boomers are living longer, and millennials are like our life, and zoomers. And I'm like, a lot of this wealth, are they going to spend it? Because there's that idea that the boomers are just like YOLO and spending everybody's inheritance. Or will there be some downward transfer of a lot of this wealth when the boomers actually start dying, if they ever do? Because there is a lot of money tied up in 80-year-olds right now. And I'm not sure, I haven't heard or seen any piece on whether, like, there will be millennials and zoomers could be quite wealthy in 10 years if they get a lot of
That's
that
a
money.
really good question. I've never thought about that. About whether that money, but what's amazing though is that it used to be that the Republicans were the party of the old and the Democrats were the party of the young. And now I think we're really seeing a shift is underway where working class people of all races, of all ages are really seeing, it's not really the Republicans, it's Donald Trump as kind of the future. And meanwhile, these kind of older, suburban, wealthy, white liberals are like, the Democratic Party. And it's so funny because during the Republican primary, I was looking at Nikki Haley and thinking, like, she's going to be the person that the Democrats are voting for in 10 years as the Republicans realize that someone like Donald Trump, who's pro-gay, courting blacks, courting unions, bragging about how close he is with union heads, right? Anti-trade, anti-immigration,
Moderate on abortion.
Moderate on abortion. That is the future of the working class. That party is going to look exactly like the Democrats did 50, 40, 30 years ago. And we're just going like this. And the liberal elites, they're in denial about it because they don't want to admit it. But that, the Democrats are the ones following the money. And you see this everywhere. So like in 2020, Wall Street gave more money to Joe Biden than they did to Donald Trump. Over 65% of people who make over $500,000 a year now are Democrats. Silicon Valley, 97% of donations to Democrats. Journalists, 96% are Democrats. 9 of the 10 richest counties in America, Democrats. And meanwhile, the majority of people making under the median income are now Republicans. So we're really overseeing this like total shift. And Donald Trump talks about this a lot, although of course, like the liberal media won't cover it, but this is kind of his message.
Wow. Yeah, there seems to be, and yet I still feel like people don't feel represented by anyone, or maybe they do. Maybe they're just like quiet about it. There does feel like there's a shift happening though. I think like Shane Gillis's show, I see it culturally, like the roast, I think there was, if you want to point to a day when there was like a vibe shift or whatever. The Tom Brady roast was a big moment where it was like people could just laugh and be irreverent on a mainstream platform. I think comedians, I've been saying this and it's a piece I should write about how comedians have held the line. I think they did hold the line to a certain comedians. Chappelle, they've seen that like you can't ignore what normies are watching. You can't ignore those numbers. So even while the culture might be saying one thing, you can see what people are watching and consuming. And Shane's show was renewed for a second season before the first season even came out. And
great.
If that does well, it should create some kind of, and it's about a dude who works in like a tire store. So, and I think people are craving that. My husband and I were talking about this. There used to be sitcoms where the working middle class felt like Roseanne. And there were so many when I was growing up where you felt like, oh, I know these people. These are my neighbors. This is the people I know and grew up with. And now it's like we watch Instagram reels because that's the closest thing that we can get to feeling like a shared like, oh, this is like something we all experience totally. As parents of toddlers or whatever. These like, I don't know where else you're getting that right now. No one so really.
Funny. Sitcoms used to be about like working class people, and then starting in the 90s, 2000s, 2010, that whole thing of like shifting upward. Now they're about like urban, urbanite singletons, right? Like, living in the city and who have like, professional jobs, right? Shows used to be about cops and now they're about like FBI agents or like the PhD that consults with the cop, right? Like, everybody has to have a college degree because the people they're making this for can't relate to working class people and don't find them, at all compelling as characters. And meanwhile, it's like, well, what is everybody else supposed to be watching?
Well, there was a really funny statistic that came out too. From cell phone data that they gathered, the most diverse, economically, the most diverse restaurants in America are places like Chili's and Olive Garden. Like even rich people love going to Chili's. It's this like fascinating study. So even when they're making, even when the people who live in these like places who would never consider going to an Olive Garden make fun of it, there are like wealthy people who still go there.
They're probably wealthy conservatives though, no, like in red states.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably good.
They have to make fun of those places because like normal people enjoy them. Just like they have to make fun of cruise ships. They have to hate cruise ships because normal people like them. You know what I mean? This is Tom Wolfe's argument in Radical Chic. He made this argument like, I know, 40, 50 years ago, where he said, like, the reason that people who are like in the elites are constantly, like, in his day, it was like really, really rich people hanging out with the Black Panthers, you know? Today, it's like really rich people saying that homeless people have a right to, like, you know, run rampant, drug addicted through working class neighborhoods, beating up working class people on the subway on the way to work. And he called it nostalgie de la boue, which is French for like nostalgia for the mud. Basically, like, if you're in the elite,
Yeah.
you have to prove that you don't have to distinguish yourself from poor people. That's obvious. You have to distinguish yourself from the middle class, like the lame middle class people. That's how you prove that you went to a fancy college that costs $100,000 a year. It's like, well, I think drug addicted homeless people should be allowed to roam the streets and even hit me in the face. Yeah, that's their right. That's how you show you're in the elites, because you are not like those lame middle class Americans who think Dr. King's vision was good, that we should live in a colorblind society. How lame, how middle class. No, I spent $400,000, so I could say that's actually racist, right? It's all about status and class.
I had the most bananas day in Los Angeles once, where I was tagging along with somebody and we were in Skid Row all day. And then we went to this fund to talk to somebody that the person I was tagging along with had a meeting with. And it literally felt like they were asking, like, so tell me, how are the pores today? You know, it's just like, I was like, what are we fucking doing? This feels very much like, so tell me, how are the pores doing today? What's going on with those pores down there in Skid Row? I was like, this is fucking bananas, from Skid Row to like Beverly Hills. It was nuts. And just the whole, I mean, like, talk about true disconnect. You're just not going to like sully yourself by going down there and witnessing any of it on your own, but you will get like some, you know, middleman to come report to you on what that was like. It was so fucking weird. I was like, this is, and California in particular, LA feels very much more and more that way to me, as all my friends with kids have left. Everyone with kids, even my diehard Los Angeles friends who were like, I'm staying here forever. One of my best friends who was like, no, we have a big community here. He's like, no, we moved, we're out, we're going to Colorado. So everyone I know with kids pretty much has left, and it has become essentially a place for the uber wealthy and their servant class. And that's, I don't see how that changes. They're not doing anything to help with the housing crisis, to make, you know, Austin just passed like a very cool thing where because there's a big movement to try and keep the housing affordable for everyone and keep Austin weird and have it be still affordable for artists, because you end up just pushing everybody out. I live kind of out in the suburbs, out in the part of the suburbs where everybody who got pushed out from the gentrification of Austin lives. So it's actually quite cool and diverse and very working middle class. Like, I think people are living the American dream, but it's a lot of people on kind of, I think they're more in like tech, somewhat. Every time I'm in traffic, in rush hour traffic, I seriously want to just get out of my car and be like, what do you all do? What does everyone do? What is everyone doing?
That's really funny. Yeah, it is weird how the Democrats have become a coalition of the very rich and the very poor. Like, they cut out the working class, and all of their policies, they all make sense when you think about it that way. So, for example, like the open border, right? It's like everyone's like, why doesn't Biden just take the L, admit Trump knew what he was doing, bring back the 3 executive actions and police the border? Like, why won't he just do that? And the reason is because neither of his constituencies, neither the rich nor the poor, are threatened by, 10 million illegal workers coming into their industry. In fact, it's the opposite. The poor people don't work, and so they're not threatened by the illegal immigrants taking their jobs. And the elites, they work in the knowledge industry, and so none of these people would ever be a threat to their jobs because they require multiple credentials and a command of the English language. It's only the working class who is negatively impacted by this. And it's so amazing because you see Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, who's supposed to be in charge of policing the border. And every single time he is asked about the border. And I've seen this. I mean, I've documented, at least 8 times I've seen him say this, either before Congress or on TV. He'll say, our corporations are desperate for workers. Like, that's literally his answer to why they're not even hiding it. They're literally importing a slave caste. They've turned the cartels into a jobs program to import slave labor to fill crappy jobs that corporations don't want to make attractive to American workers. It's all like the game plan, but everything like that, whether it's like the Green New Deal or the defund the police movement or student loan forgiveness or all of this stuff, like it's always a giveaway either to the rich or to the poor in the form of like an indulgence, right? Like liberal elites, like they see themselves as good guys, so they like high taxes because they're so rich they can afford it. And it's like a Catholic indulgence, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I will pay off the poor, right? The whole thing has erased the fact that there is a working class that they rely on to survive, who used to be middle class and now no longer is because they have plundered the middle class for themselves.
Yeah, there's a have you heard about like the plumber crisis?
Yes.
So there's like a coming plumber shortage basically because again the plumber has
All the
been
skill
kind of
trades,
like
yeah,
the butt
yeah.
of every joke and every
Yeah.
sitcom forever, and now it's kind of seen as low status, like dirty work, but nobody wants to become a plumber. There was a great South Park though recently. Have you seen the one where it was like they couldn't find a tradesman to do anything because he was so booked, and he was rolling in his limo, and then it ended up that all the white collar workers were hanging outside of Home Depot and they were trying to get work. And they were like, we sell insurance, we do all this stuff, and like the guys who were trade workers were rolling up in limos, and like they're like, we're busy, we charge like $1,000 an hour, and I'm like, this is actually the future. There's not enough people with trade. If you wanna get into to making money, I would be getting into a trade right now.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Obama literally defunded vocational training. It used to be in high schools, and so kids would come out of high school with like a sense of like, what they were going to do and an alternative to college. With Obama, it was like, well, you're a loser if you don't go to college. The only people who are going to make it are going to be in the knowledge industry. And so try to get everybody to do that when we're overproducing college educated people who are all being laid off because of AI. And meanwhile, there's a huge dearth of skilled trades folks. And it's horrible. I mean, and it was intentional. It was like they wanted everyone to go to college because they knew they would come out Democrats. It's like it's so
it's like such a racket how the government got there. Like I look at my husband's student loan. The interest rate on student loans is fucking criminal. I do not understand how that's even legal. It is like usury. I don't. Explain to me how they're 6-7%.
Yeah, it's appalling. The
How
whole
are people?
situation is appalling. And that's what's paying for Obamacare. Did you know that they use the interest to pay for Obamacare? Like the whole thing is so gross.
It's a fucking Ponzi scheme. The whole thing. It makes me crazy.
You're right.
I mean how are people supposed to ever pay those loans off ever with those kinds of interest rates?
Yeah. And also, it's like, what did they get in exchange for it? Like a piece of paper. It's just, the whole thing is really appalling.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to know, like, what were the most surprising things that you found from talking to people and how long were you driving? Were you flying around? How did you find the people?
I flew, I drove, obviously, like in the New York area, there's like, I just talked to everybody I encountered, but I wanted the sample size in the book, the sample in the book to be representative. So I talked to a professor at Brigham Young University, Joe Price, and he has a team of grad students. And so I asked them to look at the American Census Survey and compare 2000 to 2020 so I could see the trends. And they gave me this like bird's eye view of like, who is the American working class? Like, how old are people? What races are they? Where do they live? What jobs are they in? Which jobs have the highest rates of home ownership, which states have the highest rates of home ownership, all of this stuff. And how did things change from 2000 to 2020? So then I knew what I was looking for, like in terms of like what types of people so that they would be like representative. The thing that surprised me the most was like polarization is a totally elite phenomenon. Working class people are simply not polarized at all. They have zero spiritual investment in politics because the parties both are so far from what they want. There's huge consensus on the most supposedly contentious issues. So, for example, everyone I met was very pro-gay, and everyone I met was very worried about the trans thing in
Yeah.
schools, in sports. They were really upset about it. So it's like there's no LGBT concept to working class people. They all know gay people who they want treated with respect and love, including the Christians that I met. And that was whether they were conservatives or liberals, whether they were Republicans or Democrats. But again, whether they were Republicans or Democrats, they were very upset about the trans stuff. So like they were totally united on that. Almost everyone I met wanted basically a total moratorium on immigration. They felt that like the situation is out of control. These people are lowering their wages. We have a housing crisis. Each of these people has to live somewhere. Like the whole situation was very infuriating and connected in their minds to their downward mobility over the last 50 years. Although, of course, they were not anti-immigrant. They just felt that the situation, so they wanted basically much, much less immigration. And that was whether they were Democrats or Republicans. But also, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, they wanted some version of government-backed healthcare. Like they thought it was appalling that they worked so hard physically with their bodies and they couldn't afford access to good quality healthcare. I mean, while they're paying for the healthcare of their politicians who work so much less than them.
Yeah.
Like so that was like the first politician who comes out the gate saying we need much less immigration and much more access to healthcare will get an immediate 60% of the vote. And I'm not invested in whether that's a Democrat or a Republican. Like I just think that these people should be heard. But this also explains why they're not polarized. It's such a crapshoot for them because if you want both less immigration and more healthcare, like who are you supposed to vote for? The Republicans will talk about controlling the border, but they'll never talk about healthcare.
No one talks
The
about how.
Democrats
Yeah.
will talk about health. Well, they'll talk about healthcare, but they're not good on it. But at least they'll
Yeah.
talk about it. But they open the border, and they're never going back to being like a low immigration party. So you have like each party has 50% of what you want, and then is
Right.
actively undermining the other 50%. So they just don't feel invested in the system at all. And the other thing that I found, like total consensus, whether people were Democrats or Republicans, they really had very little sympathy for people who were living off the government. They did not want more welfare. They themselves did not want someone else's tax dollars. They didn't want, food stamps. They didn't want housing vouchers. They wanted their labor to pay off, to pay like with just the most modest version of the American dream. So they didn't have to constantly worry and constantly be on the edge of their seats. And they believed in opportunity and they believed in hard work. Like they really, really believed in working hard. They got a lot of dignity from their work. It was like a spiritual inheritance almost that they got from their parents. People remembered seeing their parents get dressed to go to work. They all knew people who were scamming the welfare system, but they also almost all supported raising taxes on corporations and the rich. So
Yeah.
it was like an aggressively moderate point of view that was shared whether people voted for Democrats or Republicans.
And that's what I was saying is like, where are these people? Where do they end up? How do they end up voting?
So I think, most working class people now are going to be voting for Donald Trump. It seems like he got like the vast majority of the white working class, but now he's getting the majority of Hispanic people are polling for him. And that's a very working class community. And he's polling at 35% of Black men. And if you think about the fact that in 2020, he was polling at 8% of Black men, but he got 18% of Black men. He's now polling at 35% of Black men. So we'll see what kind of numbers he gets. But the Republican Party under Trump is a working class party. The people who don't vote for them, it was for a combination of reasons. Healthcare was really one of them. Whether sometimes it was because they were the head of their union shop and they felt like Republicans, they wouldn't meet with the union, wouldn't talk to the union. One woman I spoke to said she just couldn't get past his comments about women, but that was very rare. I mean, most people didn't like the way that he talked and still were big supporters of his. Healthcare was the big thing. I keep telling Republicans this, you're losing a lot of people who would potentially be Republicans by not addressing this issue, by not taking on the cartels in the, in the hospital industry and the insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry. Those people are being held hostage by a party that hates them, and they don't agree with them about anything, but at least they hear them talking about this. It's the only issue that Biden beats Trump on, this and abortion. Although abortion, Trump is much closer to where the vast majority of people are at. So the vast majority of women that I interviewed said to me, I don't believe in abortion. I would never get an abortion, but I would never judge another woman's choice on this issue. And I sure as hell don't want it to be banned. That is the American working class. Like, I'm a conservative, I'm a religious person. I would never do it. And I would never judge somebody else for making a different decision than me.
Yeah, that's what I've always said. I think the majority of Americans are pro-life, or a lot of Americans are pro-life in the sheets and pro-choice in the streets.
Yeah. That's really well put.
like they're like, not for me, but if you need to do it, that's all right.
Right. Exactly.
So I don't know. I just wonder. Yeah, when I was in New York, actually, I always talk to every driver I ever have and anytime. And we had a Ukrainian driver. He voted. He'd been here for 20 plus years, so he was able to vote, a citizen. Became a citizen at some point, and he said he voted for Obama and then Hillary he voted for Hillary and then Biden, and now he and everyone he knows is voting for Trump.
How come? What reasons did he give?
He just said everything got worse for him under Biden. I don't, I'm not sure. There's a lot of debate over whether this is true or whether it feels true. And you have the media kind of telling you like things aren't as bad as you think they are. But Americans, I don't know, like, do you not do your own grocery shopping? Like, we know when the same fucking things that we get every week cost more. And energy crises are the prices of energy are insane. The bills you get for your like electric and for water are bananas.
The idea that a person with $54 in their bank account and 4 children to feed and to get to school and back is wrong about which economy was better for them is something that you have to have a lot of money in the bank account to be so stupid about. This is what, working class people will turn on the TV and see a panel of millionaires lecturing them about how good the economy is because all of those millionaires own stocks and own property. It's like, yeah, if you're rich, the economy is really good. And if you're not, it sucks. And they're constantly being lectured. And it's like, how much leeway do you think these people have to be wrong about which economic policies help them and which hurt them? It is so disgusting to me, that lecture, that sneering contempt for people who are so much worse off than you. It's just so appalling.
Yeah, I remember talking to somebody during Trump. This is what I was thinking about at the beginning of this interview. And I was shocked to find out that they were voting for Trump because they were in a union. And I was like, that's weird. He doesn't seem like he's pro-union. And then they said to me, I'm just so fucking sick of being talked down to by like the late night hosts and basically everybody. And I was like, ooh, we're missing something. That's when I was like, yeah, that's actually really true. There's an entire class of people that's viewed with disdain, and they literally make America go. They take care of the roads, they take care of the electrical poles, they take care of, they're there when you call 911, they're there when you're shitting in a bedpan at the hospital, they're there. It's like, and completely looked down upon.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the entire woke vocabulary, the whole first PC culture, like the politically correct thing, and now the woke language and ideology was all a giant smokescreen to justify that contempt that the elites have for the working class, instead of having to take responsibility for the fact that they abandoned these people who used to be their voters. They called them racists, basically, to justify it, to say, oh, we were correct in abandoning these people because they are contemptuous and contemptible, and that justifies our contempt, when the truth is the contempt is exactly like you just said. They would rather die than clean a bedpan. And so rather than having unbelievable amounts of gratitude for the people who are changing their grandparents' diapers so they don't have to do it, they look down on them and smear them and make their lives impossible.
And isn't it funny when it shows up in, like, we've had two really good examples of this in the past couple month that we actually covered on Dumpster Fire. You had Hochul, who is like, those kids in the Bronx don't know what computers are. And then Mayor Adams, who said that they should all become lifeguards because they're good at swimming. I'm like, you guys are so racist. And it's even worse because you don't realize you're racist. Like, this is bananas to me.
He actually said that, he said that the immigrants should become lifeguards because they're really good at swimming. And somebody was like, he's so desperate to call them wetbacks, and it's like
astonishing.
I actually love Mayor Eric Adams. I think he probably just didn't even think about it. He probably thinks they come from countries with a lot of beaches. They're strong swimmers or what have you. But it did come off like so hilarious.
I would love to know exactly what the fucking thinking was in that. Like, I want to know the line of thought that got you there to that place of, like, they're really good at swimming. Like, why would you assume all these immigrants are good at swimming?
It's so funny also because the line that got Trump the most applause at the rally last night was he kept talking about immigration and he kept saying, it's almost like he's read my book, but he kept saying,
he probably has.
He was like, Black people and Hispanic people have been hurt the hardest by this mass immigration. He's totally right. Black men specifically have really, really been, the primary victims, as the left abandoned the real civil rights struggle to cater to illegal immigrants and suggest that they are the ones who, they started with Blacks, and like it became clear that like Blacks were actually really moderate, socially and conservatives. Yeah. They had to move on from there because Blacks really do not buy into the trans thing. So then they moved on to the trans thing. And then it became clear there was like very little buy-in from anybody outside of the elites. And so now they moved on to illegal immigrants to suggest like they are should be the real object of our pity and our, indulgences and our beneficence, right? Like they are the real victims that we should, of course, now it's Hamas, right? Like the true victim, right? They finally found the real victim, in all of this.
Someone,
which are the terrorists.
Someone actually said Bridget Phetasy called it because there's like some article about Bella Hadid going out in her like Gucci keffiyeh dress, and they were like, Bridget called it, it's Hamas girl summer. I was like, I fucking told you guys. It's gonna be the like hot bathing suit of the summer. Yeah,
because they need a victim that costs them nothing to support. That's
it will change though again. I mean, it will.
What's the next one, Bridget? What's coming? Who's the next like true victim
that they're gonna attach to before the? That's a good question. I feel like whenever it's, I feel like the new one now, which feels very much like a luxury belief to me, is the children and screen time. We must think of the children. We must moderate the internet, and we must make sure these poor kids, like whenever there's kids and you can use them as
interesting.
Like there's a
you think it's a moral panic.
It's a big, I mean, look, I'm 45. I grew up during the time when everyone was worried that our brains were going to get melted by television. Yes, the internet is much more interactive. Am I shocked that they're allowed to have phones in school? Yes, that seems like something that I don't know how that got allowed. Although I do make a dark joke about like, how are the kids going to say goodbye to their parents in a school shooting? But I do not like think that that's good. It's, I was talking to my cousin last night about how we were all babysitters when we were teens, and somebody was like, oh, all the teens are off school. And I was like, they have phones. Like I know this, but it's not that I don't trust a teen to watch my kid. I just trust teens less than teens our age because they have phones and they're easily distracted, and I don't trust that they're not going to be consumed by their phone because they're in a fight with somebody or something. Like, it is so addictive. I have issues with it, and I'm a grown adult with a child, so I can't. It's not like, so there's some. I do think there's like a problem, but I also feel like it's very much like a luxury thing
Have you
to.
ever had that experience where you're like driving and like the perfect tweet occurs to you and like you're like, am I really gonna pull over to the
Or
side of the
am I gonna
road?
like risk my life to
No,
send
no,
this?
I would never like, I never text while I drive. My husband and I have a pact, but, like, I'm like, "No, but you can wait 20 minutes until you arrive at your destination." I'm like, "No, it's happened to me." I mean, I wanna
Yeah.
say twice that I can remember that I have pulled over because I couldn't live, like, having this tweet in my mind and not
Here's
doing
why it feels not like a moral panic for exactly this reason to me. It feels like an abdication of responsibility, and like we're asking Big Daddy government to solve a problem that we can't even fucking solve ourselves. I have people who send me reels all day long, and they're like all about my child's screen time, and I'm like, maybe take a look in the mirror. Like, you are a grown adult who sent me 10 reels, and I don't have even time to look at them. So
It's really funny.
like, it feels like the parents don't want to punish or regulate their kids, and the schools don't really know what to do, and everybody's saying, oh, let's let the government start regulating tech, which is like it feels like a very sinister kind of smokescreen to me. I don't like it. There's something about it that I don't like. I don't like how much, like, anytime the media is now like, oh, like, we need to stop screen time, and it's the big thing, and the elites aren't letting their kids look at screens, which is true. Like, these people
Right.
who make this stuff don't let their kids use it. But I also feel like having a kid and seeing how like they can talk to their grandparents on FaceTime, and it's partially like a lot of it's really intuitive, and they're going to have to grow up with technology and learn how to be responsible with it, and seeing even how like it reflects on me when I see how she's learning, like it reflects my bad habits. It would be much easier for me to be like, government, take care of this. So I don't know. I feel like there's something about that's coming, but I don't know that they're like going to be treated like victims. I think that the more creepy thing to me is that it seems like we must think of the children way to regulate the internet.
Right.
Like
Really interesting, yeah.
I don't like it.
I remember when they were, like, trying to say that Facebook was making young girls have low self-esteem and body issues, and I was like, do they think that we didn't, like, grow up, like, with body issues? Like, it's like, do they really think that somehow this is, like a new thing? It's
By
not a
the
new thing.
way, like my grandmother from the Greatest Generation, we found her diary after she died, and
Huh.
they had way worse body image issues than we have.
Oh, that's so sad.
I mean, maybe,
Oh.
but also I think she was like that in that show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, where they're like taking their measurements every day. It was very much like, I think she was just a woman of that time. I don't know when body issues for women started. I also think too that that's a weird thing that has been like psyoped on us, where I don't feel like people will say, oh, like these supermodels made you feel bad about yourself. I'm like, I always looked at those supermodels and was like, wow, you can be powerful and like a brand and your own boss. It didn't make me feel insecure.
Totally.
It made me feel like you can be like
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
like they seemed like power to me.
I hate when people act like, this is oppression. It's
Yeah.
not. It's like it's if you put in if you are willing to sacrifice a certain amount of, your time and your life and your work and delicious things and good wine, you will have power over men. It's like it's not like it's an oppressive system. No one's forcing you to make that call. It's like you have an option to work really hard on some extra thing and get something really cool out of it, which you can easily say no to and have all the same regular opportunities. And it's just so funny how that got turned into like, this is oppression. You know what I mean? Like, I have no choices here. It's like, it's literally a choice. And it's a choice because so many of these Gen Zers are like simply saying no to it in a way that I think is both like totally mysterious, but also, very empowering. Like, you go girl. Like they're so checked out of that, it seems to me. And I'm like, wow, it's like, seems to have solved that, that issue.
I have a really dark joke that I do that I'm like, how I know the body positivity movement has been successful is because we don't have any fat school shooters. I feel like we stopped bullying them. Like, isn't that progress? It's messed up. It's a dark joke.
That's a good joke. That's a good joke.
It doesn't really have any setup.
A good note to end on.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to take that joke with me.
Take it with you. What's your biggest defective character and your biggest asset very quickly?
I'm an ENFJ. Do you know what that is?
Is that like those types of...
Yeah.
Okay. What does that mean?
It means that like I can walk into a room. I would say this is probably both my biggest defect and my biggest strength is I can walk into a room with 20 people. I can tell you, like looking at their faces, how each one is feeling.
Yeah, that's got to be hard.
But also kind of a superpower, yeah. Yeah. And where can we find you in your book? My book's on Amazon. Please buy it. It means a lot to me that you liked it, Bridget. Seriously. Not that you said that, but I assume you did if you had me on.
Yeah, no, I love it.
Because you're really somebody who I think has a really strong bullshit meter for all the stuff I hate. So I'm on Twitter, but, trying to be on less. Took it off my phone. So hopefully on less. I'm on Instagram, which is a much lighter medium, I find. But
it is lighter.
Yeah. And if you read the book, let me know what you think. Thank you so much for having me, Bridget.
Thank you for coming on again. I love you. I love your work. I'm going to think about I think whoever they choose as a victim will be the one that's the most hurtful to Trump. So that's like, we have to think of who will be the person they can use as the victim to like really hurt Trump.
By the way, okay, one more thing before we go.
Yeah.
Because I'm really curious what you think about this. Okay, watching the coverage of the Stormy Daniels trial, I haven't actually found
anyone pay attention to that.
With this, but, well, I have to as part of my job, obviously, but I wouldn't have. But I think if I think there are women on the jury. I think a lot of the women on the jury, watching that and watching Stormy Daniels testify and talk about how she, slept with him and his wife had just had a baby a few months earlier, whatever. I think that it is in the nature of women
to judge the women.
To have watched that and felt sorry for Melania, but not to hold it against Trump, but to hold it against Stormy Daniels. What do you think?
It is a weird thing. I just said this the other day. I was like, the only people who hate women more than men are other women.
Right.
Like when you see the kind of like dynamics playing out online, I'm like, women are fucking brutally. I grew up moving, so I know firsthand, but I don't think that's far off. I think you're right. I think they would judge, they would feel bad for Melania, and they would be like, oh, that's a man being a man, and they would be like, well, why did you sleep with that? Why did you do that? You slut.
They'd be like, that bitch. Like, how could she have done that to Melania and cut Trump out of it? Like, that's how women think, no?
No, they do. And people don't even care. Like, it's weird. Like, if you think people are going to start caring about this now, you're like, I have a bridge to sell you. It's just very strange to me that you think now suddenly people are going to be like, what? No, he slept with a porn. We all know he did this.
I know.
Yeah.
All right. Vindicated. Thank you so much for having me, Bridget.
Thank you.
This is wonderful. Thank you.
The Check-In with Bridget and Cousin Maggie can now be found at Phetasy.com. It's been titled Another Round with Bridget Phetasy, and it's now in video.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.